Welcome into Mississippi State Live here on the Voice of College Football Network. Andrew Miller with you here, running 8 minutes behind schedule for tonight. Had this stream set up for 7 o'clock, but I was scrambling to get dinner cooked and then realized I hadn't finished fully my prep for the show. Had to throw a few more things together. But yeah, we are live now, ready to rock and roll. Just me on the pod, as you can figure, as it is just me. Christian Ballard not able to be a part of things this evening. He had some other stuff going on, but hey, that is okay. It is Mississippi State's bye week, and I think we are all going to enjoy getting the break from watching stressful football. It is kind of funny, last year, and I would say even a lot of 2023, I didn't consider it very stressful football because for as bad as the team was to watch, I sort of just went through the season and kind of accepted pretty quickly. And again, this goes back to 2023, but especially in 2024, yeah, this team's not good. And there's not much reason getting worked up week by week on how they're going to perform. But obviously, as we sit here for Mississippi State going to the bye week this year, 4-2, have kind of overachieved on their expectations relative to where we would have said they would have been going into the season, just maybe slightly by about a game or so. And they've set themselves up to potentially have a really nice close to the season, have a really good year two for Jeff Lebby. We're going to talk about that in this episode. Obviously, with State being on the bye week, it's a chance to look back and sort of dive into what this team has been so far and what we think this team can be for the rest of the season. So that's the goal for tonight. We're going to grade Mississippi State to this point in the season, all their units, and then collectively as a whole, what grade would you give the Bulldogs to this point in the year? We'll take a look at what are the things we are hoping to see moving forward out of Mississippi State for the rest of the season as they get to the back half of the stretch. What are the things they're going to have to do to improve the rest of the way and close the season the way that we want them to? And then we'll make a few predictions for the back half of the year. How do we think the Bulldogs are going to close out the season? And then at the end of the show, we will make our picks for the week. And I actually was able to pick up a couple games on Christian. I do have Christian's picks for our games available, so you'll get to know who we took in all of the college football games that we are going to be selecting here later in the show. That's how we'll wrap things up. If you have not already, please leave us a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and if you could, turn that notification bell on so you do know when we do go live. And if you could share the stream, share the channel, tell your friends about us, we would really appreciate it. Help us continue growing this thing. We're closing in on 100 subscribers. I believe we're at 93 right now. So just 7 away from hitting that 100 subscriber mark would be really cool if we could hit that there over these next few days. So Mississippi State's getting a much-needed bye week. This bye week kind of came at a perfect spot in the season, obviously halfway through the year, having already played 6 games, which is kind of falls in a perfect spot. Maybe, I guess, to balance it all out, you would have liked it a little bit earlier, maybe by a week or so, but it also sets up you get another bye week at the end of the year, 1 week before the Egg Bowl, which I think is really nice to get that extra week of preparation in there. So the bye week fell at a time that State, I think, needed it from a season reset standpoint where you can sit and reevaluate where you're at so far, but also State needed it because of the injuries that they've been dealing with. Obviously, the last game against Texas A&M, you were without Albert Reese and Isaac Smith, 2 of your most important players for the Bulldogs, and State's offensive line struggled mightily without Albert Reese out there. Defensively, look, they still put together a really nice effort for as long as they possibly could have against Texas A&M, but you would still much rather have Isaac Smith out there than not. I do know early in the week, those guys did not practice. Don't know what their status is going to be as we move ahead to next week for Florida. Obviously, weren't able to talk to Jeff Lebby since his Tuesday press conference, and you won't hear again from him next week. But also knowing how Jeff Lebby does things, he'll probably stay quiet on the injury front until the Wednesday practice or player availability reports come out for Mississippi State versus Florida. So we're looking at a whole week until that happens. We did, of course, get a very valuable update for State on Fluff Bothwell. Obviously, Bothwell goes down at the end of that game against Texas A&M. 4 minutes to go in the game, takes a check down, gets hit pretty quickly, goes down awkwardly, and in that moment, I think every single one of us thought season over. There's no chance with the way he went down, and then the fact they had to get the card out for him and take him off the field. No one in that moment thought Fluff Bothwell was going to be returning. Obviously, we get reports his parents were in his family were meeting him at the tunnel. Those are never good signs for your prognosis going forward. But I think around Monday of this week started to be some word and some rumblings that, like, hey, things may not have been as bad as initially thought. And then Jeff Lebby in his Tuesday presser obviously gives a very, very important update that sure enough, all the x-ray imaging came back as positive as they could have looked for. They didn't give any specifics, but I think the reading is that there was no tear, there was no break, and that ultimately it's more of a sprain or more of that rather than an actual tear, something that he can come back from. Now, obviously, Jeff Lebby did not put a timeline on it. No idea if he's going to be back out there against Florida. If I had to guess, I would think he'll miss at least 1 or 2 games. I don't know that for sure. It's just, I still think even with the positive news, that feels like, okay, he could still be sidelined for a little bit. But it certainly sounds as though Mississippi State is going to get Fluff Bothwell back this season. And that is absolutely huge for this team. He has been State's best offensive player by far. The most consistent piece on that side of the ball that they've had. There is never a time when it doesn't feel like he is moving ahead for positive yardage. He's done a great job of turning plays that wouldn't have gotten much into nice gains. He's had big running plays. He's had a few solid moments as a receiver out of the backfield. I wish they would throw to him a little bit more. 6 touchdowns scored on the season, which is the most of any skilled player Mississippi State has so far. He has been the one consistent piece that you have had from this offense. And I think that is if you had lost him for the whole season, that was going to be tough for the back half of the year. And the running back position is a group that we talked about going into the season. That is the deepest on the team. That is a position group that you feel the best about having very good options top to bottom. And I think you still feel that way. But had you not been able to have Fluff Bothwell for the rest of the season, no one else has shown that level of consistency. No one else has shown the ability to go and create yards when the yards are not necessarily there from a blocking standpoint up front. And I think State, the run game is going to probably be a big part of things for them moving forward, especially with the concerns they have from a pass protection standpoint. They're going to have to be able to run the football effectively, I think, to get a lot of things going on for this offense. And Bothwell is a guy that can make those plays. So it was going to be more of an uphill climb for the Bulldog offense if they had to go and function without him moving forward. So getting him the rest of the way is absolutely huge for this team, or getting him back rather. Now, in the meantime, how are you going to manage when you don't have him out there? I think State can still manage fairly well. Devon Booth, I thought, looked the best he had looked all year against Texas A&M. He had a pretty good game against Southern Miss to open the season, but had a few weeks there where you weren't getting much production out of him, had a few games where, okay, he would have a nice run and then, it's called back for holding and just was kind of put in some weird, tough spots. Obviously really didn't factor in against Alcorn State, which I know that's Alcorn State, but still only got 2 carries in that game on a day that State had a huge day running the football. He ran the ball very, very well against Texas A&M, and had the turf monster not gotten him, he was going to have a long touchdown run in that game. But he looked more like the player that we had grown to expect as we saw over the back half of last year. But they're going to need more of that from him moving forward. They're going to need him to be that guy, pick up that slack. Because, again, I tend to think you're probably going to miss Bothwell for at least 1 or 2 games. We'll see. He may be back ready to go against Florida, and that'd be great. But even if he does, he's going to be full strength. That's where you need a guy like Devon Booth to really step up and move forward. Then you look to Xavier Gayden. Jeff Lebby talked about a few weeks back that going forward, Gayden was going to be the number 3 guy. And since that point, we've had a couple games where he hasn't gotten on the field. It's very funny. You look to Ole Miss and at Oklahoma, where really rotated heavily amongst the running backs. And then here at Mississippi State, it's been a rotation, but it's kind of been a 2-man room for the most part, both the seasons that he's been here. Last year, once Kevon Lee went down, he did have that 3-man rotation early in the season a year ago. But last year it was Devon Booth and Johnny Daniels. This year, it's been Fluff Bothwell and Devon Booth. And you've had a Xavier Gayden who, going back to last season, every time he's touched the football has been incredibly impressive, and they just don't seem to get him on the field. I feel like that's a guy who's definitely going to have to see a workload increase moving forward. And I do think that's kind of exciting because he seems like a very talented player that does good things when he gets the football in his hands. And it'd be really good to see, okay, well, what type of workload can he have? Can he be another game-changing, explosive type back? Now, I think the question is, can he, or potentially Booth, and I know Booth hasn't shown this a ton throughout his career, can those guys be the chain movers that Fluff Bothwell can be? Can those guys be the ones who grind out yards that Fluff Bothwell has been able to be? Because that's really what has made Bothwell so good for State to this point, is his ability to go and grind out yardage, whereas the other guys are more explosive, more hit the big plays. Bothwell's been the one consistently being able to go and move the chains. And you don't necessarily have another back like that in the room. Obviously, at this point, we kind of know Johnny Daniels. It's not been said, but everybody kind of assumes he's redshirting. We're not going to see him again this season. And I don't think that even the injury news, I think even if we saw Fluff Bothwell was done for the year, I don't think Johnny Daniels would have returned. That would surprise me if that would have happened. Is Seth Davis ready to take on more of a role? But even if he is, and he's back, working himself back, and I know Jeff Lebby said a few weeks ago when he did get was able to get that touchdown run against Alcorn State that he's still not fully healthy in there all the way just yet. He's more of an explosive type player than your classic downhill between the tackles physical type. I think is it Colin Wilson who's the true freshman who's gotten a few touches, a guy you probably still want to be able to redshirt. A lot of these guys are the explosive type backs. Who can be that big physical runner? I think the answer is probably Kamario Taylor. Obviously, we've seen Taylor kind of play that role to an extent to this point, coming in as that short yardage runner for Mississippi State. I think that role has to expand for him moving forward. For one, I think a lot of us agree you need to get Kamario Taylor more reps on the field as it is, with an offense that's kind of struggling to get going at times this season. A guy who is as dynamic a playmaker as Kamario Taylor is, you just have to find ways to get him on the field and give him opportunities. That doesn't mean benching Blake Shapen. I think anybody who follows me, anybody who's listened to me knows that I'm very adamant of Blake Shapen not being the problem for this football team, and that replacing him is not going to just suddenly fix the offense. But when you have a player who is as talented as Kamario Taylor and does what he can do as a runner and has the physicality that he can provide as a runner between the tackles, that is somewhere where I think you could point to and say, okay, we're losing this with Fluff Bothwell. Who can step in and provide that? Kamario Taylor could potentially be that guy. Not to just pigeonhole him into that being his only role. Obviously, you want to find other ways to expand what he can do for State. But I would say I'm ready to move past the trick plays with Kamario Taylor, all the misdirection stuff with Taylor, and look, hey, let's let him plow ahead. Let's have the Wildcat package, but let's also just run some regular series. That goes separate of the run game stuff. But that being said, if you do have him in the game, that helps out your run game as well, because now you can run more of those option looks where defenses are having to account for him, and you can put in a few different concepts that you maybe would not be running with a Blake Shapen that you can now run with Kamario Taylor, and it takes less of the pressure off a Devon Booth or a Xavier Gaden, where Fluff Bothwell, sometimes you can plow him into a box that's maybe not the most favorable to run into. And look, Jeff Lebby's primarily a guy, if they're going to run the football, they're going to run into a favorable look to run. But there are times, still short yardage, you need to be able to plow ahead. Having the quarterback that could be a runner helps you out there. But even on a normal down basis, if you have a quarterback that is a plus number in the run game, it doesn't matter if the defense is playing single high. You don't only have to run into a light box. Now you have the ability to option a player and read them in the run game, and Kamario Taylor brings that. So I think that's going to be a big part of how this offense has to function going forward. But again, you feel like you're going to get Fluff Bothwell back at some point this season. That's absolutely huge for this team. He's too good of a player that if you had lost him, that was going to be tough for State. Even with this being a position group that's deep, has a lot of talented pieces, the fact it sounds as though they're going to get Fluff Bothwell back at some point this year, that is huge as this team goes on that quest to reach bowl eligibility when it is all said and done. Let's talk a little bit about what Mississippi State has done to this point in the season. And we want to grade them so far. So, look, State is 4-2 on the year, 0-2 in the SEC. Now, they've already doubled their win total from a year ago. They've got 3 blowout wins over lesser teams, which is not something that could have been said last season. And they've got the high-profile win in the non-conference against Arizona State. Thrilling win at home, an upset victory, get the crazy touchdown at the end. And you kind of put yourself on the map with that win. And it's a win that set up the rest of the season as being one where you could potentially take a big enough step forward that you're talking about going to a bowl game in year 2 for Jeff Lebby, which I think would be a major success for this program and where things have been the last few years, finding bowl eligibility, especially when you consider the schedule, but also with the circumstances the program has been experiencing. That would be huge for this team. And beating Arizona State gave you the opportunity to make bowl eligibility a realistic goal the rest of the way. And that goal still very much in play. So you've already doubled your win total. You've got a high profile win. You've been competitive with a Tennessee team that is top 15 in the country. Looks like it could be a player within the SEC. I know they've got the loss to Georgia, but I think they could still contend within the conference with the way they've performed at this point. Where, that game goes to overtime. You easily could have gotten a win there and moved to 5-0. Clearly, this team is much, much, much better. Now, the flip side is you're 0-2 in the SEC, coming off a really rough loss. You've started to see those injuries pile up a little bit. You're now to a 14-game SEC losing streak, which I was corrected. That is not the longest in school history. I was going off of Hail State Muse. Blame him. I saw him put out the tweet, and that's what I went with. But no, I guess it's been much longer at one point in school history. Doesn't matter. It's a rough stretch for Bulldog football right now when you talk about 14 straight losses in conference play. When is that going to end? Are you going to be able to find those wins the rest of the way? I think most of us are confident they'll get one somewhere, but can you get two? What you need to get bowl eligible? Can you find more than two? And then you start talking about having a really good year. Clearly, if the team that started 4-0 and went toe-to-toe with Tennessee is still there, that's a team that could win more than 6 games potentially, even with a very difficult stretch. But the difficult stretch is the other part of this that you have to factor in. It's an incredibly difficult schedule the rest of the way. We'll talk about the rest of the way here in a sec, but how do we evaluate this team so far? And we'll start unit by unit. And looking at the offense, how would I grade the offense? We're going to go on an F through an A+ scale. And how would you grade them? I would say overall, I give the offense a B- to this point. And I think if you ask a lot of fans right now, they're probably even going lower than that. They're probably saying something like a C or a D because of some of the frustrations. But I do think there's important context. This is a team that's averaging almost 34 points a game. They are averaging right now under 400 yards a game. It has fallen off a little bit, just under 400, 395.5 yards per game to this point. So that has dropped off here considerably. But this is an offense that you scored 30-plus in 2 of the games you absolutely should have. You had 24 against Arizona State, which I know is not a lot, but Arizona State's a pretty good defense, and you get the win. You scored 34 points against Tennessee. And yes, you got set up with a few short fields, but 34 points against a very good Tennessee team and a solid Tennessee defense. I know they're not great, but a solid Tennessee defense still is impressive. The Texas A&M game is rough, but I also consider the injuries that you had suffered, and you're on the road, bad matchup, talented opponent with all the injuries in place. It was an ugly offensive game. There's no ignoring it, but I also don't think that is representative of who this Mississippi State team is at their fullest. Now, if we get to the end of the year and the health is still a factor the rest of the way when it comes to the offensive line, and that never gels, never improves, well, then you're starting to grade things a little bit differently. And you still consider, okay, you got killed with injuries, which can you prevent that? That's tough. But if that's who the team is, you do have to start to factor it in. So far, we're not fully to that point yet. So I'm going to take it more of that game being a bit of an outlier. A lot of tough circumstances there. Now, can you sit here and say that it's an A performance for the offense at this point? No. Look, they've not played a complete game offensively to this point of the season. You played a poor first half at Southern Miss. Played a poor second half against Arizona State. Poor first half against Northern Illinois. Alcorn State, you ignore it. The Tennessee game, that one is honestly one of the more complete offensive showings because you had some production in both the first and second half of that game. I think it was 17 points in both halves of football, but obviously a very up and down game with how you performed over the course of it. And as I did mention, a lot of your touchdowns were off of short fields in that game. You didn't go on a lot of long sustained drives against Tennessee. So you definitely can't sit here and say it's been, A-level offense for Mississippi State. You do dock them a little bit. And I think that's where you dock them to a B, right? From going from an A to a B is like, we've not gotten a complete performance. The fact they're averaging less than 400 yards per game at this point, that's certainly not ideal. You take another bit of a hit there. But also I would say the struggles they've had pass protection, the struggles they've had from a pass game standpoint as a whole. Those are a bit concerning. And I did have such high expectations for this group that it does dock me a little bit. It's a Jeff Lebby team, right? And you felt like year 2, Jeff Lebby, they were going to take a significant step forward offensively. They've not been able to do that just yet. They are better than they were a season ago. No doubt about it. They are a better offense than they were a year ago. In fact, I would go as far to say they are much better. They're still not to where you would want them to be. And again, injuries have played a little bit of a role in that, but obviously Blake Shapen has not fully played as good as you would like him to so far. I think you need to find a little bit more consistency in the receiving core as well. I do think you've got clearly some very good players there, but do you have those guys that could be the consistent, reliable targets when you have to get a conversion? That's one of the things that's kind of lacking to this point. So there are certainly things that they've got to get better at moving forward. But I still think it's a B minus offense. I don't think it's a bad group so far. Digging a little bit further into the offense, biggest positive to this point, I would say skill talent, top to bottom. And Fluff Bothwell leads the way there in the season that he's had. But I know I just said you're still looking for some receivers to emerge as consistent guys. That said, Brennan Thompson and Anthony Evans have overall been very good for Mississippi State to this point. And with what they lost in the receiving core a season ago, again, you're still trying to find that guy that when it's 3rd and 10, who do I trust is going to get open over the middle of the field and provide a conversion? That's the next step, right? But in terms of having guys that are dynamic playmakers, that are real threats against SEC defenses, those two apply. And you've got the talent in the backfield. You found talent at receiver. That's your biggest positive. Biggest negative offensively, it's been offensive line. That group has just not been as good as you would like it to. You were hoping for a bigger step forward. I do think it's fair to say that unit was always going to take time to gel when you consider where they were at a season ago, all the new pieces that were stepping in. And then look, they've been banged up as well. The injuries play a big role in why that group has not been as dominant as you would like. But I would say, though, you were expecting for better, right? You would like more consistent play from the O-line, and we'll see if as they can get healthier, as they get more experience together, can that improve? Biggest question for the offense right now, it's Blake Shapen. Shapen, as I've said repeatedly, is he the problem for the Mississippi State offense? No. Does State need to bench him? No. I think they have to do a better job of helping him out in all facets. But he's not taken a major step forward the way you would like to see. There has been some inconsistencies in his game. There have been, some of the sack avoidance stuff, which is not all on him, but there's times he's got to be a little bit better with that. You want to see more from a 6-year quarterback and ideally being able to elevate the team more than what you've seen so far. Can he continue to take a step forward over the back half of the year? Does he get more settled in as the season goes along? That's the question for that group. Defensively, I'm just going to sit here. Mississippi State, I'm giving him an A when you talk about the Bulldog defense. And some of this grading is absolutely on a curve. It is relative to expectations. Part of why I would not just go B for the offense and actually go B minus is because I had such high expectations for that group. Defensively, it's probably been a B unit overall for college football this season as a whole, but I'm giving them an A because of the expectations, because there were not high expectations for that group. I thought defensively they were still going to struggle mightily, and you can say that you look at the last couple games, they've given up a lot more yards, they've given up a lot more points, and it's like, oh, once SEC play hits, that's really going to start to spiral more and more. It's possible. I don't think we're going to look up and at the end of the year, they're still allowing less than 20 points a game, and that they're still allowing only 334, 335 yards a game, which those numbers are fantastic for this group to this point. Of course, those numbers are going to continue to go up. But the fact that they've absolutely handled their business in the games against the teams they should, which I thought was a big judging point for this team to start the season, is, okay, when you face Southern Miss, face Northern Illinois, do you look like an SEC defense going up against a G5 offense? They did. Gave up a few big plays, gave a few scores. You gave up effectively 10-ish points to Southern Miss. I know they scored 17, but altogether it's like 10 to 14, I guess, of a realistic scores to that team. You gave up 10 to Northern Illinois. Shut out Alcorn. It's Alcorn, but still. Arizona State is a good offense. They're not an incredible offense, but they're a good offense with a lot of talent. You hold them to 20 points. Yes, the second half was not pretty. You still made a huge goal line stand when it mattered, and you shut them down in the first half. Tennessee gave up 20 points to Tennessee in regulation. That's really good. 20 points in regulation to the Tennessee offense when Tennessee had a pair of defensive scores in that game. And then Texas A&M. It was 7 points allowed in the first half and 7 points allowed until late in the third quarter. I know A&M really pulled away late, and once Marcel Reed started getting a little bit more settled in, that offense got a little bit better. But State's defense just keeps finding ways to make plays. They have found ways to set up the offense, and frankly, it's the offense that is letting them down in moments and not providing the consistency that you need to see out of that unit. So for Mississippi State, this defense, Coleman Hutzler's unit has taken a huge step forward. Are they special, impressive at any one thing? No. They're not a great pass rush, right? They're not a dominant run defense. They're not even a dominant pass defense for as good as State's corners have played to this point. You know, we've seen some receivers be able to get open downfield, be able to have some big plays. But they just find ways to step up. They find ways to get stops, whether it be forcing 3 and outs, whether it be holding in the red zone, whatever it is, they find ways to step up and make big plays in big moments. And they do a good job of forcing turnovers. Definitely have to give them that. This defense has been very impressive to this point of the year, and I've got to give them like an A and A minus. The only reason it's not a full-on A plus is, of course, they're just not a great defense, but they've played really well to this point, and I think you got to give them a ton of credit for that. Biggest positive for the offense, the emergence of State's corners. Kelly Jones has played really, really well this season. I know the last couple games have not been as shutdown dominant. You start facing better players, but he's still done a pretty good job holding his own in those games. Diego Brumfield, opposite of him, has played pretty well for State. State has got a pair of SEC cornerbacks that they can trot out there right now and feel pretty good. Like, those guys are not just going to get burnt all day, which was a huge question going into the season. So the fact that they have that, that's big for this team. Biggest negative so far, I would say, is pass rush. The fact that you've not been able to get a ton going on the season, 8 sacks. So they're only 2 away from matching their season total from a season ago. But, you know, Will Whitson is still tied for the team lead with 2 sacks, and he's only played 2 games. You know, you're averaging just 1 1/3 sack per game. Now, obviously, losing Whitson was a huge blow, and clearly you're missing him. But you were hoping someone else could step up with him gone. And that's kind of the one thing. If this team could get a little bit more of a consistent pass rush, more consistently get after quarterbacks. And look, quarterback hurries are a part of that as well. The Tennessee game, even when they were not finishing with sacks, I thought they did a good job of getting pressure. Texas A&M, they really struggled to get pressure in that game. So it's been very up and down for this team. That's kind of the negative, is that you've not been able to find that pass rush. But if you can find that moving forward, that'll be huge. If I'm going to look at a question for this defense, I don't know. I don't know if I have a true – what is the thing I'm questioning for this team? I guess the question is, can you keep it up? And I know the pace is going to slip a little bit, but do you reach a breaking point of the year? Kind of the way that we've reached a breaking point in games, you know, Texas A&M being the best example. Do you reach a point with the defense where we kind of look up and it's like, okay, like hindsight being 2020, that unit like was just sort of playing above their skis for a while and they're going to fall off. Can you keep this going the rest of the year? That's the big question I have for the defense. Special teams, I really didn't think this one through, and I'm not going to go through positives, disappointments, or whatever from a special team standpoint. I guess just a B. Kickoffs have not been perfect. You've had the one kickoff out of bounds, not really giving up a bunch of long returns for what it's worth. I don't think you haven't really gotten burned on either return game. I don't believe so. Yeah. You've done a pretty good job in kick coverage. Kyle Ferry, to this point, if I can pull up his stats, 7 for 8 on the year. So had the one miss, but he's been perfect on extra points. So it's been a pretty good year for him. The punting has been very up and down, but I think if it starts going to more of being, oh my goodness, why am I blanking on his name? Ethan Pulliam moving forward, I think you're going to be a lot better off. Feels like Nate Tice, they're kind of thinking as him being the guy to pin teams deep. I get it, because it does kind of look like Pulliam. His approach is very much just boom the ball as far as possible. Obviously, you reach a point of the field where you got to be a little bit more finesse, but frankly, Mississippi State in that point of the field also is typically going for it on more fourth downs. So, you know, how big a deal is that? But I would say B grade for the special teams all around. They've not been an outstanding unit. I think there were a little bit higher expectations for the group. If there's one thing I want to see, can we get some kick return going? And I know obviously that, and punt return for that matter. And I know that hinges a little bit on getting those opportunities, but you want to see guys like Devon Booth, Xavier Gaden, Anthony Evans be able to break off some long returns. I think those are things to really watch for that group moving forward. Season as a whole, how do I grade team? B plus. You're 4-2. The only reason you can't say A, and I know that still feels like maybe a little bit of a low grade considering they've outperformed expectations, and one of the losses was very close to a very good team. The fact that they haven't looked great to this point is what does dock them a little bit. And look, the last game probably hurts them a little bit more. But overall, man, 4 wins for a team that coming into the season you didn't know if they would have 4 wins to this point, that is a positive. Like the only thing that's preventing this from being an A is the fact that they haven't looked great or haven't looked like a complete team, I would say, over the course of an entire game to the point outside of the Alcorn State game. That's kind of the one thing. If they can find the ability to start playing more complete football games moving forward, one, they're going to win a few more games, but two, that'd bump the grade up more. But yeah, Mississippi State, solid B plus to this point of the season. Been really impressed with what you've seen so far, and have to be confident about the rest of the season. Let's talk about the rest of the season for Mississippi State. So what are the things that we want to see for this team moving forward? And number one, for me, it's the offensive line's got to gel together a little bit better. They need to be able to, one, get healthy up front, but they need guys like Jimothy Lewis and Javen James to be able to settle in a little bit more. They need better play from their tackles. They need better consistency along the offensive line. It's just that is going to be so important in order for the offense to function the way that you need it to moving forward. You've got to get the offense more locked in and performing better, offensive line more locked in and performing better the rest of the way. If you get better play from the O-line the rest of the season, I think the offense will get a lot better over the back half of the year. But that's the unit where things are going to hinge on. They've got to be able to do a good job of paving the way in the run game. They've got to just give Blake Shapen or whoever's at quarterback a little bit more time for those routes to develop down the field. That is a huge thing for this team. If you get the offensive line performing better, you feel a lot better about that group season as a whole. Another big thing, can you find a consistent pass rusher? Can you find that guy that you can trust each game? The defense has, the offensive line, the opposing offensive line has to account for him as a real threat to be able to get after the quarterback. Who could that guy be for this team? Can DJ Reed? I don't really feel like it's probably going to be an interior guy. It's crazy at this point. Brandon Jennings and Malik Silla, 2 guys that I think were at the top of the list for a lot of people and who's going to lead this team in sacks, do not have a sack to this point of the season. Now, Malik Silla has 3 quarterback hurries. Brandon Jennings has 1. Silla specifically, I think I saw going into the Texas A&M game, like he was graded out pretty highly from a pressure rate standpoint. And I know that there's more than sacks, more than quarterback hurries. Pressure rate is a real thing, and I didn't pull those numbers up. But obviously you need to finish and be able to generate as much pressure as possible consistently. Can you find that guy to provide that? Maybe Zachary Tillman gets into a little bit more of that role. I feel like he's played a little bit better as of late. Tyler Lockhart. And I know that you're getting more into guys, okay, well, those are guys who are going to be blitzing as opposed to actual pass rushers. But you need someone to step up. I've liked what I've seen from Calvin Dinkins. We like what we've seen from a DJ Reed. Rashawn Thomas has made a few plays, but he's mostly coming in, more as a rotational guy. Deontay Anderson had 1 really nice sack, but you haven't seen it consistently from him off the edge. Can you find that guy to be a regular pass rusher? If State can find that guy, and again, I know they had him at Will Witz and he got hurt. You need somebody else to step up. If you can find that player, that'll be absolutely massive for this team to be able to generate pass rush consistently. That would take this defense from being a unit where, okay, it could be a little bit hit or miss to being like, no, I think they'll play pretty consistently good football. And rather than just being able to give the offense a chance, possibly be able to win the team some games here or there the rest of the way if they can find more of a pass rusher. The last big thing you want to see more of Kamario Taylor. And I talked about it earlier when discussing Fluff Bothwell. You want him to be able to get in games more and find ways to help out the offense. Look, I think there's a lot of things offensively that they need to get better at. Obviously, from a pass protection standpoint, I didn't really talk about it, but from a pass game standpoint, conceptually, I want to see what Jeff Lebby does he find to tweak some things the rest of the way to where they have more quick hitters, where the ball is able to get out quicker, where they do a better job of getting guys in space. Can they start blocking better out of the perimeter from a screen standpoint? Because as I've talked about a few times, that is really hurting the offense, that they don't really have that element of the offense with the perimeter screen blocking. But ultimately, like when you have an offense that's struggling, sometimes it comes down to, well, who are the guys that can step up and can make those few plays a game that put points on the board or get you an explosive play to set up points? Kamario Taylor is the type of talent who can do that. And no, that doesn't mean he needs to be starting over Blake Shapen. I don't think that would suddenly fix the offense. But I think finding ways to get him more involved, those can be the few game-changing plays per game, potentially, that are enough to lift you over. Is he ready to be consistent enough to be your starter down in and down out? No, I think that's where Shapen is still going to be your guy, and trusting that he's most likely going to execute better play after play. But can Kamario come in and give you a few big plays a game that end up being game-changing moments? I think it's a possibility, and that's why you want to see more of him moving forward. You know, I'm not going to sit here and tell you he's worth a touchdown a game. I'm not going to tell you he's worth a field goal a game. I have no idea. But I think you need to find a way to get him a little bit more involved and see if that can be what sparks this offense moving forward. If those are the three things that happen, really, I mean, look, the trench play is the big thing, right? If you get better on the offensive line and find more of a pass rush, that's going to fix a lot of problems for the offense. But I think whether the offensive line is better or not, getting Kamario Taylor more involved is something that I think can help this team out and give them more opportunities. Let's make a few predictions to close out the season. Will Mississippi State beat another ranked team? I'm not going to go game by game here. We'll just do a few things like for the season, how to play out. So the remaining schedule is at Florida versus Texas, who is no longer ranked, at Arkansas. So 3 straight unranked teams. But then you close with 3 straight ranked teams, and teams that I imagine will be ranked the entirety of the year. Home versus Georgia, at Missouri, and then you host Ole Miss in Starkville to close out the regular season. So really what you're banking on is, do you beat one of Georgia, Missouri, Ole Miss, or potentially could Texas get ranked again? Sure. So that's a possibility, although if they lose to Mississippi State, they're probably not going to be ranked. Although I guess at the time the game played, if A&M beats Oklahoma, maybe we're talking about a ranked Texas team at that point. Will Mississippi State beat a ranked team? I'm going to say no. I think I don't know that they are fully there yet. And I think the problem for me is I look at the teams that are ranked on state schedule, and I feel like they are strong enough that it's going to be hard for Mississippi State to be able to find a way to get the win, ultimately. I think your best chances at wins are in these next 3 weeks, which puts a lot of pressure on some of the predictions coming up here in a second. But I guess, look, there's a chance a team like a Missouri, could they fall out of the rankings? I seriously doubt Ole Miss would fall so far out of the rankings. But, I mean, I won't rule out being able to beat Ole Miss. But I'm going to err on the side of caution here. I'm not going to go bold. And I'm going to say Mississippi State doesn't get a ranked win the rest of the way. But you've got some opportunity. Yeah, I'm so tempted to go the other direction and say they'll find a ranked win and be optimistic. But I'm want to stay as realistic as possible. I'll say no there. Over under 2.5 SEC wins. And I think if you ever actually set an over and under total on a betting line, it'd be 1.5 would be the question for Mississippi State. But I've got another question that kind of leads into that. So let's go a little bit more optimistic. You started 4-2, and even though you're 0-2 in the SEC, you start the year 4-2. You feel like you've got a chance to be better than a 2-win conference team. Can we say over under? I'm going to go under. And I know I kind of just leaned into it, right? If I'm not picking them to get a ranked win, I'm probably not picking them to win 3 conference games. I think it's going to be a grind to be able to find 2 SEC wins the rest of the way. I think they can do it, but it's going to be a grind. And I think they'll finish under that. But the last most important question, do the Bulldogs reach bowl eligibility? I will say yes. I think they will find a way to make a bowl. Obviously, based on what I've laid out, I'm basically saying they need to win 2 of their next 3 games if they're going to be bowl eligible. Ultimately, does it have to be 2 of the next 3 between Florida, Texas, Arkansas? No. Look, I would give them a chance. I would give them a chance in the other 3. Georgia has not looked super impressive with that game at Starkville. You will have a chance. Missouri is going to be very tough, but I think we're going to learn a lot about the Tigers in this game, and that game falls in a weird spot for Missouri. And then when you talk about Ole Miss to end the year, it's in Starkville, it's an Egg Bowl. You're competitive in that game every single season. Ole Miss does not look like a dominant football team to this point. They're very good. They are deserving of the ranking that they have. Do they look like a team that, from a actual on the field standpoint, look like a top 5 team in the country? I don't think so. Maybe they go and prove me completely wrong, and they beat Georgia next week, and then they continue to get better and better. But you'll have a chance in that game. I think State can find 2 wins the rest of the season and be able to close out the year in a bowl game. But it's going to be close. But I think 6-6, this team will find a way to get to a bowl. So let's a look ahead at the season for Mississippi State. Let's take a look at the rest of the year. Take a look at the week for college football. This is a good week to be a Mississippi State fan with a bye week. If you're someone who just wants to watch college football, the one thing that always kind of dings you with bye weeks is college football season is when you watch your team, you end up missing a lot of other really good games inevitably. And State, because of the way the times that they've played, we've missed a lot of good games, at least not being able to fully lock in on them. This is a good week to be. A lot of people like to take the bye week to go and do off other things. If you're a college football fan, this is a great week because you get a lot of awesome games. So let's run through and make the picks. I talked about Missouri getting the first big test of the year. Number 8, Alabama comes to town. Look, I think Mizzou is a good team. I think Mizzou absolutely has a chance to get the win in this game, and I think it's going to be close. Ultimately, I'm trusting Alabama a little bit more right now. I really like what I've seen from them and Ty Simpson. So I will take the Tide to get the win. I think them being battle-tested to this point certainly does help. Christian also going with Alabama, which, by the way, on the season, a 7-3 week for me last week. Christian went 5-5, so I'm now 2 games back on the season from him. 38-22 overall, 40-20 overall for Christian. Red River, Oklahoma versus Texas. The question is going to be, does Jean Mateer play? Obviously, there's a ton of question about that right now. But ultimately, I don't know if it matters. I'm taking Oklahoma to get the win. I get the fact the line is so close, makes you think, okay, what does Vegas know? And I totally understand that. I guess I won't be floored if Texas were to find a way because it is Red River. But right now, even with Mateer out, I just trust Oklahoma more. I think Oklahoma's defense could win this game on their own against Texas. So I will take the Sooners. Bobby Petrino coaching Arkansas on the road at number 12, Tennessee. Look, I think this game will be fun to watch. I think Arkansas will be able to score some on Tennessee, and I think Petrino will clearly find a way to scheme up some points, and is definitely going to want to be appealing to the boosters as much as possible. Tennessee may not get stopped once in this game. I don't know how Arkansas will ever manage to get a stop. I'll take the Vols. Christian also on the Vols. He was also in Oklahoma. I said that as well. Florida taking on Tennessee, which I realized Christian did not make a pick for, so I'm going to have him send me that one back here a little later. Florida taking on number 5, Texas A&M. Both teams coming off of big wins. Billy Napier doing the thing he always does, which gets the big win to save his job. Can he actually build off of it? I think Florida looks a lot more like the team we expected coming into the season. Dallas Wilson clearly helped them out quite a bit in what he was able to provide for their passing game. And that defense was really impressive. I think on the road in Aggie land, it's a little bit different story. I think Texas A&M is ultimately who gets it done here. And again, we'll have to wait on Christian's pick for that game. Deep South's oldest rivalry, number 10, Georgia, going on the road to Auburn. Is this a letdown spot for the Bulldogs? This is clearly a Hugh Freeze spot, right? Auburn's off a bye. It's a rivalry game at home in Jordan-Hare. Big-time opponent for Hugh Freeze, a game Hugh Freeze really needs to win to get boosters back on his side. Is he going to be able to get it done? No. I'm going to take Georgia to win. I'm not putting my faith in Jackson Arnold and Auburn. If Jackson Arnold finds a way to be able to hit some passes downfield to Cam Coleman and Eric Singleton, then I think they've got a chance. I don't trust them to be able to do that. And I think that's really the only way that they're going to be able to find success against this Georgia defense. So I will ultimately take Georgia, Christian on Georgia as well. South Carolina going on the road to Death Valley to take on number 11 LSU, a game that before the season we would have had so much hype and excitement for that now in the moment, all of us are kind of like, this game's going to be disgusting. 2 of the worst offensive lines you could possibly watch, 2 quarterbacks that have not lived up to expectations at this point in the season. Ultimately, I'm going to take, but both teams have a bad offensive line. Both teams questionable offensively as a whole. Both teams can't run the football. I think Lenore Sellers' ability to make some of those legs could help, but I still think they're on the road. LSU's got the better defense of the two, and I'll trust him to make enough plays at home. I'll take the Tigers. This is going to be our first official disagreement. I don't know which way Christian's going to go on Florida Texas A&M, but he is going with the Gamecocks to get the win at LSU. Friday night action for G5 game, and an important G5 game in the American Conference. This could be a huge game for college football playoff implications. Number 24, South Florida, going on the road to undefeated North Texas, coached by former Mike Leach, wide receiver Eric Morris. Shout out to the Pirate. This is a really fun game. Expect a whole bunch of points with these two teams on the field. Veer and shoot versus air raid. This is going to be a lot of fun to watch. I think South Florida's a really good team, man. And I trust their defense just a little bit more. I trust Byron Brown a little bit more. Tricky spot on the road, and I do think UNT is legit, but I'll take South Florida to get the win. Christian also going with the Bulls. The battle for the Illabuck, which I don't think has been played since like 2017, something like that. Number 1, Ohio State on the road at number 17, Illinois. Should be a crazy fun atmosphere in Champaign. Biggest home game, I would imagine, in Illinois in a very, very long time. I think Ohio State just looks like a war machine. Illinois is playing well, but I also don't think they're quite as good as we thought going into the year. Ohio State just looks awesome, and I'm not going to be able to – I'm not taking them to take a loss here. The Christian calling the upset. He's going with the Illini to pull off the win at home. Number 7, Oregon at number 7, Illinois. Number 7, Indiana. I can't talk. I keep getting it wrong here. Number 7, Indiana. Going on the road to Eugene to face number 3, Oregon. Top 10 matchup in the Big Ten with two teams that should not both be in the Big Ten. Indiana should, but Oregon shouldn't. How legit is IU? I think IU's legit. I think IU's going to be able to compete in this game. I think Oregon is right up there with Ohio State as one of the very best teams in the country. And I think they're clearly a rung or two ahead of Indiana. I'm going to take Oregon to get the win. Christian didn't make a pick on this one, so that's another one we'll have to see who he takes. Last but not least, number 15, Michigan at USC. This is a really fun game in the Big House a season ago. Now they're going out to the West Coast. Lincoln Riley and his team, are they prepared to handle Big Ten football? I'm going to say no, and I'm a Lincoln – look, as an air raid guy, I don't hate Lincoln Riley, but I think Michigan's a little bit better than I thought they'd be. Bryce Underwood and that offense have actually been kind of impressive to this point, making a lot more plays than I would have thought. And I think USC's good, but I think Michigan's going to be able to run the football, and I trust Michigan's defense more. Even though USC's defense isn't awful, they're still not to the same level. So I'll take Michigan to get the win. Christian also going with Michigan. So those are our picks for the week. Should be a really, really fun weekend of college football. Looking forward to just being able to sit down and just watch ball stress-free and enjoy things. But obviously, we're going to be ready for Mississippi State to get back to. That's going to be a big game, I guess a little over a week from now when they go down to Gainesville. Huge game for the season. Both, how do they come out of the bye week and what do they look like moving forward? But, that's a big opportunity. That is one of the more winnable games we think on the schedule the rest of the way. If they're going to be able to break through and have the type of season we want them to have, the Florida game is going to be really important for them. So that's going to be a huge, huge week. Obviously, we'll be back next Monday to break that game down because, it's going to be one of the more important games of the season. So you'll see us back on Monday for that show. That'll do it for us tonight. Thanks to those of you who tuned in and those of you listening afterwards. Really do appreciate each and every one of you. If you haven't already, please like the video, subscribe to the channel. If you're not, turn that notification bell on so you do know when we do go live. And if you could share the channel, share this video, share the stream, share some of the other videos we put out, tell your friends about us. We would certainly appreciate it. Thanks everybody for tuning in. As always, swing your sword and Hail State.
College football is even more exciting when you've got some action on the line, and the games are even better when you're cashing in. And the Voice of College Football is the place to be to get the greatest value. Start with my picks. 75% against the money line, 58% against the spread, and I've got a 40-plus year track record. 11-0 in the college football playoff for me last year against the money line, 8-3 against the spread. And I'm just the warm-up act. Steve Merrill of Wager Talk is our ace in the hole, show stopper. 7 years with the voice of college football, over 30 years in the industry. Steve gives us analysis on all the big games, but you can't miss Steve's weekly under-the-radar pick. 28-12 against the spread the last 3 years. You also get picks from some of our top analysts here at the Voice of College Football, including Corey Bratta, Matt Zemek, and Steve Dace. Check out those numbers. Become a YouTube or Patreon member for just $99 per month. Go to the main channel on YouTube, click Join, and then select a betting tier. Do the same thing on Patreon. Make 2025 a winner now.